My family fired me to hire my sister, but they didn't know I owned the entire block. The keycard reader beeps red. Once, twice, a third time. I press the plastic badge to the scanner again, harder this time, as if force might fix the humiliation creeping up my spine. Nothing. Just another flat buzz and a small blinking red light. I stand there, frozen coffee in one hand, phone in the other, heart stuttering in confusion. My breath fogs slightly on the glass of the front door. Inside, I see movement people walking briskly through the lobby, a delivery guy carrying catering trays, the receptionist pretending not to look at me. My name is Cassidy Miller. I'm 36 years old and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. For the past 12 years, I've worked at my family's business, Miller and Hartwell Interiors, a boutique design firm that was supposed to be my legacy. I started as an unpaid intern right out of college, learned every part of the trade, took on the clients my sister turned down, pulled all-nighters designing portfolios while she jetted off to wellness retreats. And yet here I am, locked out of the building I helped build. At first I think it's a tech glitch. Maybe the system rebooted. Maybe my badge demagnetized in my purse. So I call up to the receptionist. "Hey, it's Cass. Can you buzz me in?" There's a pause. Then she says something that still makes my stomach tighten when I remember it. I was told not to let you in." Silence. I laugh. Not because it's funny, but because there's nothing else to do. "What are you talking about?" Another pause. "You should probably call your parents." I don't. Instead, I walk to the parking lot in a dazed heart pounding in my ears. I sit in my car for 23 minutes with the engine off, staring at the building I've entered every weekday since I was 24. I text my mom. "Hey, card's not working. Is there something going on?" No reply. I try my dad. Same text. Same silence. I drive home still clinging to the idea that this must be a mistake. Maybe IT did something wrong. Maybe there's been a mix-up. Maybe this isn't what it looks like. But deep down, I already know. The next morning I try again. Same thing. That's when I see her, my sister, pulling into the parking lot in her brand new electric SUV. She steps out laughing into her phone, tossing her perfectly curled hair over one shoulder. She doesn't even glance my way. She walks straight to the door badge held confidently to the reader. It flashes green. It opens. And she walks through. Just like that. The texts start trickling in by noon. Coworkers reaching out in carefully worded messages. "Hey, I just heard what happened. Are you okay? They said you're stepping away." Is that true? Please don't be mad I didn't know until this morning. I'm not okay. I'm not stepping away. And no, I'm not mad at them. I'm mad at my family. I call again. This time my mother answers. "Cassidy," she says, like she's surprised to hear from me. "We've been meaning to talk to you." "You fired me," I say flatly. "It's not like that," she replies. "Then what is it like?" A pause. "We thought maybe it was time to let your sister try her hand at leading things. You've had a good run, but you tend to get controlling, emotional. We need fresh energy." Fresh energy. That's what I've been reduced to. An expired battery. My father gets on the line to explain the business logic. How Elise, my sister, has connections, how she's more client-facing, how the team needs a change. I listen numb as they talk about me like I'm some dated software they've finally had the courage to uninstall. They don't even say goodbye when the call ends. I sit there on the couch in my one-bedroom apartment, heart-shattered hands trembling. I gave them everything. Late nights, early mornings, missed vacations, my 20s, and they gave me silence. Locked doors, a sister in my place. That night I open my laptop and start scrolling through a folder I haven't touched in months. Deeds, contracts, old property files. Because while they were busy dismissing me, they forgot something. A few years ago, when our business expanded, the downtown strip was still half empty. Cracked sidewalks, vacant storefronts. They told me not to waste my money buying up those properties. "You're better off investing in stocks," they said. That block's a lost cause. But I didn't listen. And now that block is mine. Every deed, every inch, and right in the center of it all, the building that houses their business. They fired me without knowing they were standing on land I own. And maybe that's where this story really begins. If your family discarded you, like you didn't matter, and you held the deed to their future, what would you do? I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. I laid on the couch, my phone dim beside me, staring into nothing as the realization kept replaying in my mind they fired me. My own family. After 12 years of loyalty. And not with dignity. Not with honesty. Just erasure. The next morning I opened Instagram. And there it was. My sister's smiling face on the company's page, standing in front of a mood board I'd created. The caption read, "Big changes at Miller and Hartwell Interiors. Excited to announce Elise as our new creative director. A fresh vision for a new chapter." Fresh vision. No mention of me. No acknowledgement. Not even a thank you post for over a decade of service. Just a photo of my sister in heels, I probably paid for once, now standing on the ashes of what I helped build. I scrolled the comments. "Yay, Elise. About time. Perfect fit. Can't wait to see what you do. Love seeing powerful women taking over." Each word felt like a blade. No one knew what really happened. No one knew what I'd done for that company. How I stayed late to fix accounting errors. How I dealt with impossible clients while Elise ghosted emails. How I rebranded the entire firm after a PR nightmare when she leaked a client's remodel online by accident. They always forgave her. Always. Because Elise was the golden child. The blonde, delicate, socially graceful younger sister who cried when criticized and charmed her way out of accountability. My parents worshipped her tantrums like they were gospel. She floated. I built. She blinked. I burned. And now I was gone and she'd floated right into my chair. I didn't even need to go back to the office to know what it looked like. She probably had a new desk already. My favorite mug, the one I'd hand-painted during a wellness retreat I didn't want to attend, was probably tossed in the trash. My plant gone. My sticky notes erased. My memories scrubbed from their version of reality. I sat there shaking, heart-pounding with a betrayal too large to name. I wasn't just replaced. I was discarded. And they weren't even subtle about it. Around noon, my uncle called. He never gets involved in anything. But this time he said quietly, "Cass, I didn't know. I thought maybe you stepped down." I laughed bitterly. "Does that sound like me?" He sighed. "No, it doesn't." And then he said something that made me go cold. "I think this was planned. Your sister's been having meetings with your parents for weeks. She's been talking about how she's ready to take over. Ready. As if she earned it. As if my family wasn't feeding her a throne I built with my own hands. I could feel it happening all over again. The erasure, the rewriting, the convenience of pretending I was never part of it. That Elise had always been the real star, and I was just a placeholder. But I wasn't. I knew that now. Because while they were meeting in boardrooms and posting selfies, I'd been quietly buying pieces of the city they didn't think were worth anything. While they groomed her for public praise, I negotiated leases, gutted storefronts, and hired contractors to restore broken-down properties. They celebrated Elise, but I had the deeds. The sidewalk outside their business, mine. The parking lot behind their building, also mine. The small corner cafe they always grabbed lunch from, mine too. And I'd been quiet about it all. Until now. Because something about this betrayal changed me. It peeled something back. Something primal. Something sharp. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't even going to argue. I was going to show them. Not through revenge. Through ownership. I stood in front of the mirror that night, tired eyes and all, and whispered to myself, "They replaced you like you were disposable. Now show them what they missed." If your family handed your legacy to someone who didn't earn it, and you had the power to remind them who built the kingdom, how would you do it? I still remember the first day I walked into that office, nervous, eager sleeves rolled up before anyone asked. My mother handed me a notebook and said, "Start small. Listen before you speak." I did. I started small, organizing sample catalogs, wiping down countertops, brewing coffee before meetings. Elise said the smell of it gave her headaches. My dad joked that it was good for me to learn the grunt work. So I did it. All of it. Quietly. I worked holidays, skipped birthdays, answered emails at midnight. I was the one who stayed behind when the HVAC broke during a summer thunderstorm. I was the one who drove back to the office when a client forgot their samples. I once slept on the office couch because we had a pitch the next morning and no one else remembered the deadline. But they never saw that. They only saw Elise. Even when I was winning clients, expanding our contracts, refining our vendor relationships, Elise walked in with a smile and a latte, and somehow it erased every 18-hour day I'd poured into that place. They said she was better with people. Translation: she was better at being liked. And when she made mistakes, they were growing pains. When I made suggestions, I was too assertive. One time she forgot to confirm a major installation date, and the client nearly pulled the entire project. I stayed up 2 nights fixing it. You know what they said. Elise is under a lot of pressure. Thank you for handling it. They never asked why she was under pressure. They never wondered who picked up her slack. It was always like that. Always. I learned to smile through it. I swallowed my pride. Told myself it was for the good of the business, for the good of the family. I believed that if I just kept giving more, they'd see it. That one day they'd look up and say, "Cass, we couldn't have done this without you." That day never came. Instead, I got fired with a locked keycard and a replacement who was genetically blessed to coast through life. Elise didn't even call me after the promotion. Not even a text. She posted a boomerang of herself twirling in her new office chair, with the caption, "New era begins." New era. Like I had died. I tried to write an email to my parents. I opened the draft 3 separate times, fingers hovering over the keys. But what do you even say to the people who decided your work was disposable, your loyalty optional? There was no formatting for that. Instead, I opened a different file. A spreadsheet. An old one I hadn't looked at in months. It listed every property I'd bought in the past 5 years. Every corner shop, every small parcel, every forgotten structure with cracked bricks and boarded windows. They used to tease me for it, Cassidy the landlord. My dad would smirk. "You're going to fix toilets now." But I wasn't fixing toilets. I was building an empire. And they never noticed, because they never looked. I bought that first storefront for $48,000 after a plumbing disaster scared off the last tenant. Everyone said it was a waste of time. But I saw potential. I spent 3 months negotiating repair permits, another 4 getting a local bakery to sign a lease. Now there's a wait list of people who want to rent in that space. That one property turned into 5. Then 10. Now 17. 17 properties. All in walking distance of each other. All along the same block. The same block where my family's firm now sits like a shiny glass bubble floating in a sea of buildings they don't even realize have changed hands. They stopped seeing me the moment Elise opened her mouth and said, "I think I'm ready." But they forgot something. I never stopped watching them. And now I don't need their recognition. I have something better. Leverage. I sat at my desk that night and made a call to my lawyer. Not to sue, not to make noise, just to start shifting some of the leases. Quietly, purposefully, because power doesn't always scream. Sometimes it signs paperwork at 10 p.m. under dim lights and waits. Waits for the moment they'll come knocking on a door they didn't realize I owned. If your family pretended your contributions didn't exist, and you had a way to remind them with quiet, undeniable truth, would you? There was no cake, no awkward card passed around the office, no last lunch with coworkers, no farewell email, no parting handshake from my father at the conference room door. I didn't get a goodbye. I didn't even get a moment to gather my own things. When I returned the 3rd morning after the keycard incident just to ask for my belongings, the receptionist, who couldn't meet my eyes, handed me a cardboard box, neatly taped shut. My name written across the top in black Sharpie like a label on leftover food. "I didn't pack it," she said quietly. "It was already taped when I got here." I nodded numb. "Thanks." The box was too light. Everything inside it had been sanitized down to the bare minimum: my framed picture of the downtown skyline, my client notebook, and the mug my sister once bought me for Christmas with Boss Babe printed on it in rose gold letters. That was the worst part. She left the mug in, I guess she thought it was funny. I carried it out in both arms, each step heavy with the kind of grief that doesn't make noise, just sits behind your ribs like a fist. No one came out to say goodbye. Not my dad. Not my mom. Not Elise. The same sister I once helped through a panic attack before her first client meeting now sat in the office I designed behind the desk I paid to refurbish holding meetings I used to run. I drove to a nearby park and parked in the farthest corner facing a row of pine trees. And I wept. Not out of weakness. Out of something deeper. Something sacred. The kind of cry that isn't just about what happened, but what it means to be erased by the people who made you. To be told in every silent moment that you were only ever valuable until you became inconvenient. I stayed in that car for 2 hours. Then I went home. The next morning, Elise posted a photo of herself in the office lobby, her arms crossed in front of a fresh new signage update. It said Miller and Hartwell, Next Generation Design. The caption read, "Stepping into my birthright." Birthright. As if I'd been a placeholder. A substitute until the real heir was ready. But here's the part she didn't understand, what none of them understood. I didn't need their blessing anymore. Because while they were planning my exit, I was building my entrance somewhere else. In the weeks that followed, I watched from a distance. Clients started asking questions. Some emailed me privately asking if I'd gone independent. Others reached out just to say they missed my touch, my precision, my presence. One wrote, "It just doesn't feel the same without you." I didn't respond. Not yet. Let them sit with the silence they gave me. Instead, I took long walks around the block I owned. Past the old barber shop, the crumbling florist, the small alley Elise once laughed about because it smelled like history and mold. That alley. It ran between 3 buildings I bought under my holding company's name. Every cracked brick, every warped window frame mine. I spent my evenings at city council meetings, zoning hearings, small business meetups. I learned about development tax credits. I partnered with local vendors and independent artisans. I became the shadow my family forgot was watching. They fired me without realizing they'd walked off a ledge, and I wasn't going to save them from the fall. I was going to stand at the top of the hill they mocked and wave politely. And someday soon, they'd look up from the glass walls of that office and wonder why every store on their block was suddenly under new ownership, answering to one name they never bothered to remember, mine. If the people who threw you out couldn't see your value until it towered over them, would you offer a ladder or let them climb alone? The first night in the new place, I slept with my coat on. The walls were thin. The heater made a sound like a distant cough. There were crumbs in the kitchen drawers, and a light bulb in the bathroom flickered like it was trying to warn me about something. But the window looked out over a street I owned. And that made all the difference. I'd found it by accident. A faded for rent sign taped to the door of a bakery I used to pass during lunch breaks. I remembered Elise making a face once saying the smell of yeast made her nauseous. She never liked anything that didn't come with branding. The bakery owner, a woman named Gerda, met me in flour-dusted jeans and a ponytail that looked like it had survived a hurricane. "Upstairs is clean," she said. "Tiny, but it's got a window and hot water most days." It had no furniture, just old linoleum floors and walls painted a color I can only describe as half-hearted eggshell. But I signed the lease on the spot. It was mine. No hand-me-downs. No family name on the paperwork. No shared mortgage or subtle reminders of who helped me get there. Just me. I moved in with 2 suitcases, the cardboard box from my old office, and a single folding chair I picked up from a thrift shop for $7. Gerda gave me a loaf of sourdough as a welcome gift. "You've got good bones," she said, nodding toward the building, but I knew she meant me. That night, I sat by the window eating buttered bread from the heel of the loaf, staring out at the streetlights blinking over cracked sidewalks. This was the block. Mine. I had 17 properties now. Most small, a few crumbling, but all mine. I had bought them gradually, slowly, while everyone else was too focused on quarterly numbers and showroom drama. Every property was owned through a shell company, Willow North Holdings, a name Elise would never remember from the finance meetings she barely attended. I owned the bookstore that barely broke even, the nail salon with the busted neon sign, The empty lot where kids left their bikes to rust. The parking lot behind my parents' office. The former antique store now under renovation for a new cafe. And now the upstairs loft above a bakery where I was relearning how to sleep. I had nothing fancy. My clothes stayed folded in my suitcase. My laptop sat on a crate. But for the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking to fit into anyone else's expectations. I was expanding. Quietly, steadily, I used my evenings to sketch floor plans and crunch lease agreements. I made spreadsheets of every tenant, every expiration date. I flagged delinquent accounts, sent quiet notices, and restructured deals with people who deserved second chances. I wasn't just a landlord, I was a builder. And with every passing week, the block changed. Tenants started painting their doors. A coffee cart showed up outside the bookstore. The florist reopened under a new owner who offered free delivery to local hospitals. I watched it all from my window with a cup of tea the same way my family watched Elise's feed and thought, this is what success looks like. But they didn't know where the roots were growing, because roots grow underground hidden. And mine were spreading. One afternoon I heard Elise's voice outside. She was leaving the office mid-laugh talking too loudly on her phone about a brand expansion and a new social media intern. She didn't look up, didn't know I was there, watching from above. She passed the bakery gagged at the scent of rising dough and muttered something about carbs being career poison. I smiled. Then I went back to my spreadsheet. Because while she curated captions and applause, I was mapping square footage and profit margins. She fired me thinking I'd disappear, but I was right above her, watching, waiting, building. Would you tell them where you are or wait until they see what you've become? The first one I bought was a corner unit with broken windows and a sagging roof. The kind of building that whispered, I used to matter before the years wore it down. It sat at the far end of the block, boarded up, and forgotten its brickwork scarred from years of sun and rain and indifference. I remember standing in front of it, clipboard in hand, when my father walked by with a coffee in one hand and his Bluetooth headset in the other. He paused just long enough to sneer. You're wasting your money, he said, not even stopping. Buildings like that are better off torn down. I didn't respond, because I already knew the truth. The city had just announced a downtown revitalization grant, and that corner cracked windows, and all was inside the designated zone. I bought it for $42,000. 2 months later, it was worth double, and they never even noticed. That became my blueprint. I watched the family business move into a shiny new office space in the center of the block, all glass and granite, and overpriced light fixtures. They were so busy celebrating their growth that they never asked who owned the building next door, or the one across the alley, or the narrow strip of parking lot they borrowed for client events. They never noticed the name Willow North Holdings popping up in their lease documents, purchase orders, property tax filings. They thought I was gone. They thought I was licking my wounds. But I was here, quietly expanding my footprint one worthless property at a time. I paid cash. Always cash. That way nothing traced back too quickly. No mortgage statements, no board meetings, just transfers and signatures, and a team of lawyers who knew how to make me invisible. It wasn't about hiding, it was about timing, because I didn't want them to know I owned the block, until it was too late to stop me. My mother once joked that I had a thing for hopeless projects. She said it when I adopted an old dog from a shelter. She said it again when I started volunteering with the community garden behind the bakery. But the truth was, I didn't see hopelessness. I saw undervalued potential, and I knew exactly what to do with it. I bought a strip mall with peeling paint and a leaky roof 2 stores down from their showroom. My dad had passed on that deal 3 times. I bought it during an off-market sale for less than what they paid for their signage rebrand. 6 months later, I had a smoothie bar, a co-working space, and a yoga studio signing leases. I never showed up in person. I didn't need to. I let it build, let it grow. I watched city reports show rising property values. Watched traffic studies confirm increased foot traffic. Watched their own business celebrate its central location, never realizing the ground beneath them was shifting. Because here's the thing, no one tells you. When you build from below, you don't need their applause. You just need their inattention. And they gave me that in spades. Every board meeting they had without me, every pitch Elise led where she misquoted design budgets, every time they ignored my warnings about seasonal downturns and online competitors, it all created space. Space for me to move, to own, to win. I made deals over coffee and dive diners. I sat in city council backrooms and pitched plans with no logo on my business card. I outbid them on a parcel behind their loading dock, then offered a long-term lease at a 10% increase, and they took it thanking the broker for saving them from future regret. They didn't know they were paying me. And every month when the rent checks cleared, I remembered my sister's smug grin the day I left the office with a box in my arms. She thought she won. She thought she inherited something. But she never realized I was never after their blessing. I was after the block. And now I had most of it. If the people who said you were wasting your time walked straight into the world you built, how long would you wait before telling them? The first rent check came in the middle of a rainy week. I was curled up on the window seat above the bakery sipping weak tea and watching traffic crawl past puddles on Main Street when I got the notification ACH deposit from Miller and Hartwell Interiors. Amount 496728. I stared at the number for a long time. It wasn't a surprise. I'd set the lease terms myself. The payment matched the figure I'd written into their new long-term agreement, an agreement they signed 3 weeks earlier through a leasing agent who worked for my holding company. Elise had apparently pushed for it after their accountant flagged the need for stability and a locked-in rate before rent in the area spikes again. Smart move, but I couldn't stop staring at it, because for the first time in my life my family was paying me. Not asking, not taking, paying, and they didn't even know. I leaned back against the wall and laughed soft, bitter disbelieving. Not because I was happy, not because it felt triumphant, but because the universe had twisted the knife in just the right spot. The very people who once made me beg for approval now paid me on time in full, like any other tenant. The following week, another check came in, this time from the law firm in the building 2 doors down. Then the smoothie bar, then the florist. Each of them tenants in buildings my family never cared about. Buildings Elise said would drag the value of the whole block down. She had no idea that those leases, those low-tier eyesore spots, were funding renovations, padding my reserves, and generating passive income at a rate that quietly eclipsed what she was earning as creative director. Every time I saw her walk past my window in a designer coat balancing a lavender latte and barking into her phone about quarterly projections, I wondered how it would feel for her to realize she was standing on land I owned. To know that while she walked like a queen, she was renting the castle from me. I didn't need to confront them yet. The beauty of it was in the stillness, in the quiet irony. They thought I'd vanished, that I was licking wounds, maybe hiding out, maybe freelancing, maybe bitter but broken. They couldn't see the blueprint, the strategy, the web. I watched as they planned a second location on the same block. My father bragged at a city event that they'd anchor the whole street. Elise posted a filtered photo of her standing in front of the vacant property they intended to lease with the caption, "Next chapter unfolding. Legacy always finds a way." That building, also mine, I let them proceed. Let the architects walk through. Let their team measure walls. Let Elise hold meetings with interior designers and stylists, all under the lease clause that said I had the right to terminate with 30 days' notice. Not because I planned to, not yet. I just liked knowing I could. I started to walk the block differently after that. Not like I used to, where I kept my head down and hoped someone might say good job. Now I walked like I belonged, because I did. I knew every crack in the sidewalk, every tenant by name. I paid to fix the streetlight on the corner. I hired a local muralist to repaint the alley Elise once called ugly. I even funded a free little library outside the barber shop stocked with books donated by tenants. I was creating a place where people mattered, where people saw each other, and they still didn't see me. One of the tenants, a young woman named Mila, who ran a plant shop I helped secure a reduced rent for once, asked me, "What made you want to buy this whole block?" I didn't lie. "Because someone told me it wasn't worth anything I said." She grinned. "Their mistake." I nodded. "The best one they ever made. If you were paid every month by the same people who once dismissed you, Would you ever tell them where the money was going? No one sees the woman behind Willow North Holdings. That's by design. When I first formed the company, I met with a lawyer who specialized in anonymity. "You want to be invisible?" he asked. I nodded. "Then forget ego. Forget titles. You don't exist anymore. Only the entity does." I signed the paperwork that afternoon. Willow North became the name on every lease, every deed, every property tax bill. It was elegant, nondescript, the kind of name that could mean anything or nothing at all. A trust-owned holding company with no public face, no flashy website, no LinkedIn presence, just layers of quiet legal protection shielding the real owner, me. Cassidy Miller, the daughter they pushed aside, now the silent landlord of the street they call theirs. There's something powerful about being the name they whisper, but never meet. Every month, Elise and my parents exchange emails with a property manager they've never seen. They negotiate extensions, ask for maintenance upgrades, request special terms, all filtered through two people I hired from out of town. Friendly, polite, and trained not to flinch when someone name drops Miller and Hartwell like it means something. They think Willow North is some faceless investment firm, a corporation with no soul. They don't realize it's a woman sitting above a bakery sipping tea and deciding what happens to their future with one click. The day they signed the lease for their second office location, I was there. Not inside, outside, across the street, in a borrowed black SUV with tinted windows. Watching, listening. Elise walked in like she already owned the place. I saw her hand gestures through the window directing where the new reception desk should go. She twirled once, arms wide. "It's perfect," she told the designer beside her. "It'll be my crown jewel." I smirked. I'd already approved the blueprints for the cafe going in next door. A cafe that, if needed, could expand into their space with one clause in the lease and 30 days' notice. Not out of pettiness, out of foresight. Because the thing about crown jewels, they only sparkle until someone turns off the lights. Back at my loft, I updated the tenant spreadsheet. Rent payments were stable. New applications were pending. The old antique shop had accepted an offer from a local ceramicist collective. The parking lot behind their office was now generating nearly $3,000 a month in public event rental fees. Every corner of the block pulsed with energy. My energy, not theirs. And I never once raised my voice to claim it. That's the part people forget about power. It doesn't always look like a throne. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like an unread email. Sometimes it looks like Elise twirling in a space she thinks is hers, unaware the woman who actually controls it all is watching from just across the street. I got used to the shadows, used to the quiet control. I liked it more than I expected, because there's a freedom in not being recognized. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to perform. You just do. You build, you decide, you own, and they never see it coming. My mother mentioned Willow North once in passing. I was walking behind her in a boutique downtown. She was complaining to a friend about lease delays and said some faceless firm owns half the block now. No soul, no connection. Probably run by some trust fund kid who doesn't know what they're doing. I stood 3 feet behind her holding a scarf I didn't buy, and I smiled, because what she saw as distance, I saw as safety. If you had a chance to shape everything from the shadows, if you could control without being seen, would you step into the light or stay where you're most powerful? From the outside, Elise still looked flawless. She posted curated photos with golden hour lighting her at client brunches, on-site walkthroughs, standing confidently in blazers too clean to be worn twice. The captions were all variations of building dreams, one project at a time or leadership is an energy. But behind the hashtags, cracks were forming. The first signs came quietly, little things. A missed deadline here, a rescheduled client consultation there. One of our biggest vendors pulled out of an agreement after 3 late payments. Then a senior designer I'd hired 5 years ago left the firm without notice. He posted something vague on LinkedIn about respect and sustainability, and I didn't have to ask what he meant. I knew. Because Elise wasn't built for friction. She liked the spotlight, but not the weight of the stage. Clients began complaining softly at first, then more directly. I started hearing whispers from old contacts who thought I'd vanished. What's going on over there? Is it true? Elise's assistant is handling budgets. I thought you were still running things. They weren't questions. They were warnings. Elise had inherited the shell, but not the soul. She could mimic leadership in small doses, smile in meetings, memorize buzzwords. But she didn't understand the work. She didn't study the vendors. She didn't know the difference between overhead and margin. She liked power, she just didn't want the responsibility that came with it. And slowly the business began to wobble. Not dramatically, not yet, but in the ways that count. Margins thinned. Staff turnover increased. My parents started attending more meetings, trying to quietly support her without admitting she was in over her head. They weren't ready to face it. That their chosen one, the daughter they replaced me with, wasn't ready. Might never be. And the worst part, Elise knew it too. I saw it in her posture the day she walked past my window with a half-finished coffee and her phone pressed to her ear, not speaking, just listening, nodding to someone on the other end, as her eyes scanned the sidewalk like she wanted to be anywhere else. The shine was dimming, because shine doesn't last, not without foundation. And Elise had never built hers. She'd borrowed mine, stood on it like a stage. And when they pushed me out, they expected her to float. But floating isn't leading. It's drifting. I knew it would only get worse. Because when you don't know how to course correct, you panic. And when Elise panicked, she did what she always did. She covered it in glitter. New branding initiative. A fresh Instagram aesthetic. A coffee cart brought into the office as a morale booster. But no coffee cart fixes a 19% drop in client retention. No rebrand hides the fact that the books are slipping into the red. They were falling, not all at once, but in slow motion, the kind of failure that takes a while to show up, but lands like a piano when it does. And all the while, the rent checks kept arriving, on time. To me, because while Elise was focused on fixing the surface, she didn't know the floor was already cracked. I wasn't going to step in, not yet. I didn't need to humiliate her. I just needed her to see what happens when the work isn't respected. When the crown is handed instead of earned. When you silence someone not because they're wrong, but because their presence reminds you that you didn't do the building. I was watching the company from every angle now. Not because I missed it, but because it mattered. Not the business, the lesson. Because some empires aren't stolen. They collapse from the inside. Would you step in to stop it or let them learn what happens when a throne is given? Not earned. The email came from their accountant. It was written with all the soft language of someone trying to break bad news, gently phrases like financial realignment, temporary liquidity squeeze, and considering strategic options. But the message underneath was plain. They were bleeding, not fast, not catastrophically, but steadily, silently. Payroll was stretching them thin. Vendor terms were tightening. And now that the new office Elise was so proud of was eating up more cash than it brought in, their margins were crumbling. I knew the numbers already. I'd been watching from the shadows, every rent payment they made becoming a data point in the larger picture. Their first office lease, their second location's custom renovation bill, the uptick in late vendor payments, the decrease in net client volume. I could have drawn their trajectory on a napkin. It was only a matter of time. And now, the time had arrived. They needed to sell. Not the business, at least not yet. That would come later. First, the accountant suggested selling the building. The one they'd called their legacy space. The one they had christened with a champagne toast and plastered across brochures and their LinkedIn banner. The building I already owned the parking lot behind. And the zoning rights next to. It wasn't just about buying back what they stood in. It was about closing the circle. I got the call from the broker 2 days later. He didn't know I was the owner of Willow North, of course. All he had was a name and a set of instructions, discreet buyer, looking to expand their investment in the block. Serious offer, cash ready. Interested in acquiring Miller and Hartwell's primary location. The broker added, "They're hesitant, sentimental about the place, but money talks." I smiled. Of course they were sentimental, because that building wasn't just glass and brick. It was the last thing they thought I didn't touch, and now it was slipping through their fingers. Elise tried to salvage it. I know because she called an emergency meeting with my dad and a few longtime vendors. One of those vendors who still respects me even now forwarded me a summary of the conversation. Elise said they could pivot, that they just needed one big client, that they were repositioning the brand. My father suggested a loan. My mother wanted to cash out a retirement account. But none of that changed the math. They were sitting in a building they couldn't afford, and the only real offer on the table was from me. I let them stew on it for a week. Then Willow North Holdings sent an official letter of intent. Full market price, cash offer, flexible exit terms, leaseback options if needed. Professional, precise, polite. A lifeline disguised as a transaction. They didn't know it yet, but I'd already decided I wouldn't kick them out. Not immediately. I just wanted them to know they were renting space in a world they no longer controlled. That everything they'd tried to strip from me, dignity, position, ownership, I now held in my name. Or at least, the name I chose. The broker called again. They're considering the offer seriously now. Between us, I think they know it's their best shot. I leaned back in my chair by the window, coffee going cold in my hand. Let them consider. Let them stare at the paperwork and wonder who this buyer was. Let Elise scroll through property records late at night and puzzle over how someone bought up half the block without anyone noticing. Let them feel the edges of a power they once held over me, now folding in from every corner. They had backed me into a wall and smiled while they did it. Now they were facing one they couldn't climb. And I wasn't even in the room. Not yet, but soon. Would you let them sign in ignorance or walk into the room and make sure they saw you holding the pen? The conference room was too bright. Big windows let the afternoon sun pour in, gleaming off the glass tabletop, and the silver trays of untouched cookies someone thought would lighten the mood. It didn't. My family sat on one side. Elise fidgeted with the clasp on her handbag legs, crossed, staring down at the purchase agreement, like it might rearrange itself if she blinked long enough. My father sat stiff in his suit jaw tight the way he always looked when someone else had the upper hand. My mother beside him kept glancing toward the hallway as if searching for a last-minute miracle. Across from them, 2 lawyers from Willow North Holdings waited calm and unreadable, and then the door opened. I walked in. The sound of my heels on the tile was the only thing anyone could hear for a moment. The room fell so silent, I could feel the tension curl around my throat like a ribbon. I took my time. I walked to the end of the table, the seat reserved for the controlling party. Then I sat directly across from Elise. Her face went pale. My mother's eyes widened, then narrowed in disbelief. My father didn't move at all. I placed the folder in front of me, opened it with quiet precision, and pulled out the deed transfer agreement. "Is there a problem?" one of the attorneys asked, gently breaking the silence. "No," I said without looking up. "Everything looks in order." Elise found her voice first. What are you doing here?" I looked her in the eye for the first time in nearly a year. "Finishing what you started." My father leaned forward. "This is a Willow North deal." "It is," I said. "I am Willow North." The words didn't echo. They landed. Flat, heavy, final. My mother's mouth opened like she was going to say something. But nothing came out. Just a small sound, half breath, half gasp. I slid the final page across the table, tapping the signature line. "I thought you might want to see the face of the person you've been paying rent to." They didn't speak, didn't blink. They just stared at the paper, at me, at the deal they couldn't afford not to take. I let them sit in it, let them feel it, not in anger, not in gloating, but in gravity. In the silence that follows after a storm has passed and you realize you're standing in the wreckage you built yourself. "You're the one who owns the block," my mother finally whispered. "Yes." "All of it," Elise said, voice thin, almost trembling. I nodded. 17 properties. The bakery. The bookstore. The parking lot behind your office. The new cafe. That's mine too. The zoning rights on your expansion project, also mine. She swallowed hard. "But why?" That was the question, wasn't it? Why? Why didn't I tell them? Why didn't I lash out when they discarded me? Why didn't I scream when they locked me out? Because some lessons are too big for words. Because some betrayals don't deserve confrontation. They deserve consequences. "I didn't need to humiliate you," I said quietly. "I just needed you to remember who built the thing you threw away." I didn't flinch. Didn't cry. Didn't let my voice crack. They had done what they thought was best for them. Now I was doing the same for me. They signed the papers. All of them. No fight. No protest. Just silence, shame, and the soft scratching of pens on paper. And when it was over, I stood. From this point forward, I said, "You'll be tenants. Your lease terms are fair. Market rate. You'll be treated like everyone else." My father nodded once. Elise didn't look up. My mother whispered Cassidy, but I didn't wait to hear the rest. I walked out the door, my name on every document they left behind my shadow, stretching long across the floor they used to think they owned. If you were sitting across from the people who once erased you and you held every piece of their future in your hands, would you have signed or walked away? The first 30 days passed quietly. They moved forward like the building didn't change hands. Like I wasn't the one holding their lease. Like my name wasn't stamped behind every bill, every clause, every structural limitation they now had to work around. I knew it was denial. I let them stay there. But then the small changes began. A new clause appeared in their lease: no unauthorized signage outside the building. Elise's giant backlit billboard had to come down. She threw a fit in the hallway, according to the florist next door. "This is ridiculous," she'd said. "Willow North is trying to rebrand us." Then came the restricted parking notice. They had to start paying to use the lot they'd parked in freely for years. I'd added timed permits, tiered pricing, and designated zones. They grumbled. I smiled. And then the construction started. That's when they really began to understand. It was the old laundromat 2 doors down. One Elise had always referred to as dead space. She once said it was rotting in plain sight. Now scaffolding rose from its roof, and signs for a high-end co-working lounge went up. The Assembly, a modern work collective. It was mine, of course. A place for creatives, designers, independent firms. The type of space Elise once imagined opening but never moved past mood boards. She asked my mother at lunch loudly if they should try to secure a collaboration. Maybe run a design feature or an event series with the people behind the Assembly. My mother, who now read every lease with trembling hands, just said, "I don't think that would be a good idea." Elise didn't get it. Not yet. But my father did. I saw him on the street a week later. He was standing near the corner holding a folded lease in one hand and staring across the block like it had betrayed him. His eyes moved slowly from the new coffee shop sign to the awnings with Willow North placards to the property managed by Willow North Holdings, etched on the side of the newly painted brick building. He turned and our eyes met. He didn't wave. He didn't glare. He just stood there, like a man who had built something only to realize he'd never owned the ground it sat on. I didn't stop to say hello. He didn't move to follow. We passed each other like strangers. And maybe we were. Maybe we always had been. Inside the office, the mood was shifting. I'd heard from a friend of a friend who still worked there, said Elise had lost 2 major clients, that she was struggling to balance the books, that morale was slipping. People were leaving early, whispering more. They were running out of time. The business wasn't failing yet, but it was hollowing out, and they knew now they weren't in control. One afternoon, Elise stood outside the building talking to a contractor. I could see her from my office above the bakery. She was flustered arms waving, pointing toward the sidewalk, where a Willow North crew was marking off territory for new benches and lighting. "It's our space," I heard her shout. The contractor calmly pointed to the permit nailed to the post. It wasn't hers. Nothing was. Not the sidewalk. Not the building. Not the reputation she thought she was shaping. And not the ground beneath her feet. That realization hit her slowly. Not like a blow, but like a tide that pulled her under 1 inch at a time. She started walking slower on the block, looking over her shoulder more, hesitating before meetings. I don't know if she's figured out how much I own, or just that she doesn't. Either way, the illusion is gone, and what's left is the one thing they never planned for: me. Not the daughter they replaced, not the employee they erased, the architect, the strategist, the woman they made in silence. If the people who cast you out suddenly stood on ground you built, would you show them mercy, or let the foundation speak for itself? It hit me one night when I was walking home. The air was cool and clear, the sidewalks humming under the soft buzz of string lights I'd paid to install the month before. I passed the florist's shop still open late thanks to a community grant I'd funneled her way. Past the cafe where a poetry reading was just wrapping up. Someone inside was laughing. I didn't know who. That part didn't matter. I stopped in front of the design office, their office. The lights were on. I saw Elise pacing, my father sitting stiff in a chair, my mother staring at a screen with her hand covering her mouth like she was holding in something sour. And I realized they hadn't just fired me. They had tried to erase me, not just from payroll, from legacy, from history. They had replaced me with someone they could mold, someone more photogenic, someone easier to praise publicly without having to face what I had built in silence. They wanted Elise to be the face of something I had given a backbone. They tried to take my years of sacrifice and call them transitional. They tried to turn my devotion into a stepping stone for someone who never paid the toll. And they did it with the kind of calm only people accustomed to control can wield. That's what hurt the most. Not that they thought Elise was better, but that they thought I wouldn't fight, that I'd leave quietly, that I wouldn't matter once I was gone. But they didn't know I was still there, still buying, still watching, still becoming. I think about that version of me sometimes, the one who stood outside the office with a cardboard box in her arms and a silence she couldn't speak through. The one who went home that night feeling like everything she built had vanished in a locked door and a blank stare. She didn't know she was just getting started. They tried to take my voice. I built an empire instead. They tried to silence me. I bought the ground under their feet. They tried to turn me into a lesson in knowing your place. Now they look up from their desks and realize the place is mine. Elise can't hide it anymore. Her shoulders have slumped. Her posts are more strained, her filters more forced. She used to walk the block like she owned it. Now she barely looks up. My mother's smile is thinner now. My father checks the mailbox with hesitation. They know. Not everything. Not yet, but enough. Enough to realize that the daughter they once deemed too emotional, too serious, too much, was the one holding the future they thought they controlled. They tried to take my dignity, my role, my story. But all they did was give me the space to write a better ending. And I've been drafting it block by block, clause by clause. Would you remind them of everything they stole or let the weight of your success say it for you? The letter went out on a Wednesday. It was standard, neutral in tone. Just a reminder about upcoming lease policy updates effective next quarter. Small things like revised maintenance responsibilities, new signage approval protocols, and stricter subleasing clauses. It was signed by Willow North Holdings. Not me. Never me. But it might as well have been handwritten in red ink and taped to their front door, because this time it wasn't about a payment or a friendly renewal reminder. This time it was about control. And they knew it. The next morning I stood at my window with my tea hibiscus honey quiet power in a cup and watched Elise storm out of the office in heels too high for her pace. She was on her phone, voice sharp, mouth tight, her movements clipped and panicked. My mother followed a few minutes later, clutching the printed letter in her hand, shaking it like it might bite. I knew what part stung the most, the paragraph about event noise limitations. They had just sent out invitations for their spring showcase the week before a big open house client's music hors d'oeuvres. Elise's favorite way to perform. But now it required written approval from the property owner, me. They sent an email requesting an exception. I didn't respond, not out of spite, out of policy. They wanted to play legacy. I played law. They wanted status. I had structure. They still occupied the same physical space, still sat in the same chairs. But everything around them was shifting, tightening. They were slowly becoming what they had once feared the most. Tenants. Ordinary, replaceable, governed by someone else's rules. And it wasn't just logistics, it was presence. They used to walk through the front door like they were walking into their birthright. Now they hesitated, checked over their shoulders, read every bulletin with nervous eyes. Elise started wearing less color. My father kept the lights dim longer into the morning. They were adjusting. To me. And I didn't even have to raise my voice. I just adjusted the rules. They asked for signage changes again. Requested to install a new mural inside the lobby. They wanted to freshen the brand. I delayed the permit. Politely, professionally, deliberately, because they never asked when they took everything from me. They never paused, never consulted. They made decisions in locked rooms and smiled while I packed a decade of loyalty into a cardboard box. Now I return the favor with paperwork. Let them feel what it's like to knock, to wait, to wonder. Elise tried to reassert herself. I saw it when she staged a pop-up display near the front window without prior approval. Bright colors, bold graphics, her name in looping script. It was down by morning. The compliance team removed it before the building opened. I didn't issue a warning. I didn't need to. The message was clear. This was my block. And their presence here was not protected by blood or memory, only by contract. They still showed up, still smiled in meetings, still ran the business. But everything was different. They weren't leading. They were lasting. And I was deciding how long that would continue. Because now they lived inside the very structure they once tried to exile me from. Now they operated under my policies, paid rent into my accounts, walked through doors. I let them walk through. They didn't know yet what I'd do next. But I did. Would you evict the ones who once erased you? Or let them live under your rules and remember every single day who really won? There's something strange about silence at the top, not the uncomfortable quiet of being ignored. I lived through that for years. No, this is different. This is earned silence. The kind that comes after the dust settles when there's nothing left to fight for, because everything you built is already standing. I sip my coffee slowly now. No rush. No scrambling to prove anything to anyone. No tight knots in my stomach wondering if I've done enough to be seen. The world beneath me moves, but I don't chase it anymore. From the top floor of my newest building, an old hotel turned luxury lofts, I can see the entire block. My block. The sun hits the windows just right, bouncing off the glass of the Miller and Hartwell storefront like it's begging for warmth. They still open at 9. Still turn on the lights like clockwork. Still pretend nothing has changed. But everything has. They live in my ecosystem now, on my terms. I own the sidewalks. They walk across the walls. They lean on the air. They breathe when they step outside for a break. It's been 6 months since the closing, 3 since their spring showcase fell apart, and 2 since my name was whispered during a local business feature as the quiet force behind downtown's revival. The article called me the architect in the shadows. Elise reposted it without knowing who it was about. The irony still makes me laugh. I never confronted them again. Never stood across the desk demanding an apology. I didn't need to. They apologize every day now in their restraint. Their lowered voices, their request emails signed with respectfully, and the way my mother can't meet my eyes when we pass in the building's shared lobby. That's the thing about poetic justice. It doesn't need applause. It just needs time. My name is no longer on a door that they can lock. It's on deeds, on zoning permits, on the bottom line, on the very structure they thought they ruled. And I didn't win through revenge. I won through ownership. The power they tried to hold over me is now the floor beneath their feet. They still call me Ms. Miller in correspondence. They still send checks on time. They still haven't asked to meet in person. And I let it be. Because I no longer need to be the daughter who begged to be seen. I am the woman who saw herself. And that was enough. I take one last look out the window and whisper something I never thought I'd say again. Thank you. Not to them. To the girl who stood outside that office with a box of her life and a silence full of fire. The girl they tried to erase. She built this. She survived. And now she stands at the top, not angry, not bitter, just free. Would you have burned the whole thing down or rewritten it brick by brick until it bore your name? The sun begins to lower, casting long shadows across the buildings. The streets glow golden warm against the pavement. Somewhere someone is laughing. A door opens. A bell rings. Life goes on. And I smile, because not every ending needs noise. Sometimes the greatest triumph is the one carried quietly. Not shouted from rooftops, but felt deep in your bones where peace finally takes root. I used to dream about them regretting it all, imagining apologies, tearful reconciliations, phone calls too late but still sincere. But now, I don't need those things. I don't need anything they couldn't give me before. Because what I have now is real and whole and mine. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. Out of growth. Out of grace. I still walk the block. Still stop for coffee. Still wave to tenants who greet me with the respect I never had to demand. I live in a world I shaped with patience. With pain. And with quiet power that doesn't need a spotlight to shine. I was never the storm. I was the architect after the wreckage. And from here everything makes sense. So if you're standing where I once stood, unseen, underestimated, cast out, don't lower your voice. Build. Build until they realize the door they locked you out of now opens at your permission.